Alright, so here's the first start with the key switch. Maybe. Starter don't quit on me. There it is. Sounds pretty good. Okay, so you can see it starts and runs. So, you know, wire it just red on red, black on black, and fire it up. Good luck. Could you imagine if I was really like that? That'd be awful, wouldn't it? So I'm going to dissect this thing and show everybody exactly what I did. See the car here. I don't want somebody to wire this thing up and make a mistake and burn their car down. I don't want even my mistakes to pass on, but I'm going to show you exactly how I wired mine. And if you already know how to, if you have any wiring experience, go ahead and, I mean, you can skip to the end of this and look at the Word document that I'm going to put online to show you what wire goes where. It won't be like a wiring diagram, but it'll show you point to point what goes where, hopefully, if I don't forget anything. All right, so let's get started on that. Just going to tear it apart and show you. Okay, this is the dreaded moment you're all waiting for. How to wire up this engine. I'm starting to wonder myself if I'm doing this the right way or not, but I've done a few other standalone harnesses and I can make them look pretty decent, but you get a lot of money wrapped up in them to make them look decent. Okay, to get the blue locks out of these connectors, I'll try to work looking through the camera to make sure you can see what I'm seeing. There's that. Okay, now to remove a wire that you don't need, basically any of them that are not labeled by this point, you can't just pull it out. There's a lock inside of there and you have to either pry it up from this side like that, or you can go in from the back side, she said. But I'm having trouble getting these locks undone from the back side. So, if you can see inside of here, anyways, this little tab in the center has to be pushed up one way or the other, and then you can pull the wire out of the back side. Alright, I'm going to try to explain this step by step, every wire according to this list, because this is correct. But I will put this on a better like a Word document deal, and it'll be at the end of the video, so if you want to fast forward to the end, that's fine. But I'm going to do my best to explain this. I've tried to make this video like 4 times already, and it's so complicated. It's hard to explain it, to get someone to follow along, and I don't want anybody to make a mistake. So Here we go, we'll try it again. Okay, maybe I should start on the why I did it this way. So this is the factory underhood fuse block from the 99 Silverado from part 1. If you've seen it, that's the truck I pulled it out of. This saves you some money and some time on the fuse and relay part of it. And I didn't tear into any of the wiring at all. So, or as far as the factory truck harness here, I didn't tear into it. So it saves you a lot of time not having to go through it. So what I like about this thing, there's pros and cons to this. I'll start with the pros. You still got your relays, they're still labeled. You've already got a bunch of fuses. So, and I was able to just make this work. The hard part was mounting the whole thing. That's kind of the big con behind the whole thing. I'll try to show you how I did it, but it's not quite done yet. Alright, so this is how the harness runs into it, and it's real easy to get to and tear apart. Of course I say that, and this is the one time I can't get it apart. Alright. See this connector? It's C1. This is C2. This is C3, I believe, this red one. You take all the wires out except for this gray one. That runs your fuel pump. You can remove all of them except for this pink one. And depending on how you're doing the starter, you can get rid of this one or you can leave it. So I'll take that apart piece by piece and show you what I've done here. This is C100, this big one here. And you use just I don't know, like 6 or so wires out of it. If you want to use a OBD2 connector, let me flip this camera around. Okay, first of all, let's talk about how I mounted this mess. I used a couple sheet metal screws and just screwed it into that. I gotta make a cover for the bottom to keep the mud and water and stuff coming through the bottom to the fuse block. Kind of a, I don't know, just a sheet metal inner fender deal. Just go a little ways. I typically don't drive this thing in the rain, but if I have to, I can. So why did I use this thing? So this is the factory fuse block from a 99 Silverado. I wanted to be able to use this because I've already got it. It didn't cost me any money. And if you're using a whole parts truck like I did, then you're going to cut this. You're going to use this. You're going to keep it. Even if you decide to make a standalone harness, you're going to cut wiring out of the back of it, but you need to know some of this stuff. All right. But the way I've got it wired up is I can take an engine out of another 99 to 02 Silverado, shove it in here, plug it into the back of this fuse block, and it's running. It's going. I don't have to make another standalone harness. Or I don't have to spend time switching the harnesses. So, pros and cons to it. The pros is it didn't cost me any money. It's like the only money you have wrapped up in it is on the heat shrink butt connectors. You end up spending a bunch of money on a standalone harness because a lot of guys will buy like a wire up fuse block. Current Performance, I think, is one of the companies that sells one. And they're just $200. I've used them. They're nice. They work, but they're $200. So this saves you that much money. Now you can do a deal like on LT1 Swap where you can, you know, buy your own relays and your fuse block and everything. I've got one here. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, this is how they would show you to do it on a LT1 swap, and it works just fine. It's just kind of a mess. You kind of got to keep in mind that you're going to put it somewhere where you don't want moisture or anything to get to it, really. I've used it. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. This is the current performance deal. They have it wired up to where your fan relays and AC relays and all that stuff goes into it. If you're looking for a more professional look, that works. Nothing wrong with it. It works just fine. Like I said, it's just money. Show you a standalone harness. This is the last standalone harness that I made. Goes through the firewall. Had the computer on the inside of the car. But I have a lot of money wrapped up in this sleeving, but I mean, it looked halfway decent, but it's just time and money. So with this factory harness, I have no time in it. I have not tore into it. All the time I have is working on the back of this, taking the wires out that I don't need, and then wiring the wires that I do need into the car to make it operate off a key switch, have a check engine light, and have an OBD2 connector. Okay, so let's move on to the power source. Mine is in the battery. My battery is in the trunk. Look at that. Real King for the win. $50 battery sitting in the old spare tire wheel well. I ran a cable up to the front of the car, and that positive cable runs right up to the starter. The ground cable runs through the back here and is grounded to the frame. Alright, that positive cable comes all the way up the front of the car, through the firewall, down to the starter. Now what you can see is I have two battery cables on this starter, so I'll explain that. And that is the factory starter solenoid wire from the Silverado. It's a big purple wire. It's in the factory harness, and that's hooked up. More on that in a minute. The factory Silverado battery cable runs up to the factory Silverado junction block here. And I didn't want to cut this up. I didn't want to mess with it because this wire then runs into this fuse block. Okay. Alright. So that's power to the fuse block. So how do we get power to the fuse block from the key switch? Alright, there's a few options on this, but I'm going to show you the way that I did it. In the back of this connector, C1, it just unscrews from the fuse block. Okay, these are labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, and then 1, 2, 3, all the way down to 12. There's a red wire coming out of this thing from B11, which would be down here, that you could leave in there, and you could hook a relay up to it, or even hook a toggle switch up to it. And that supplies 12 volts to your switch, key switch, toggle switch, however you want to do it. I would really recommend putting a relay in to make this work, but I didn't. I feel okay with what I did, but you might want to put a fuse in. Alright, so I took that red wire out, and the reason is because I've already got two red wires right here. These wires are from the factory starter that supply power to the fuse block underneath the dash of the car. So we've got power, 12 volts there all the time. Looking at this underhood fuse, or under the dash fuse block, see that spot there? It says ignition 1 on it. Well, I just put a spade connector, or a female connector, and plugged it into that hole. And that's a red wire because I didn't have any pink wire. But I ran this through the firewall and then back up to the pink wire in C1. Okay, so here we are back at the pink wire at C1. This is C1 A9. Alright. So now when you turn the key on, you have this fuse block is now on. You've got power to it. Now, with that being said, you've got this whole thing will run. That wire supplies power to this whole thing. So if all you're worried about is supplying power to the ignition coils and the injectors and just making this thing run, it's done. That's it. One wire, done. All right, so now how do you start it? You have some options. I limited my options because I had a pair of side cuts on me and just started cutting wires last year. So it kind of hurt me. I could have done this a way easier way. So off of your ignition switch, there's a big purple wire coming off of it, and that's the one that actually starts the car. That runs right to the starter solenoid. It comes out of the firewall down here, out of that connector under the wiper motor, runs over to the starter solenoid, and you have power there. Okay, so I cut mine because I had an underhood deal from Current Performance on the car, and I wired it straight to a aftermarket relay. Okay, so this time I did away with that. I'm using the factory 99 Silverado wiring. So what I did was the big purple wire under the dash, when it comes out of here, you wire that up to this purple wire with a white stripe, and that is in, looks like C10 on this connector. Boy, this camera does not like to focus. There it is a little bit. Okay, C10. Alright, so that then supplies power to the relay. However, it gets tricky from here because you can bypass this or you can make it work like it was from the factory. Okay, so this 99 Silverado uses a neutral safety switch, just like this car probably did from the factory, right? It's either got to be in park or neutral to start it. Now I've decided to go ahead and use that. I'm using a 4L80E transmission. My factory shifter hooks up to it, so I'm using the factory column shift in the car. To make this work, let's see, where is it? All right, to make this work, I had to use the factory Silverado park neutral safety switch, the gear shifter indicator deal that hooks up to the 4L60E transmission. So just having those wires hooked up and having this rotated to the right spot for park or neutral would allow you to start the car. If you had the factory wiring, the factory purple wire from the firewall run to your solenoid, you don't got to have that. You can bypass it. So there's another way to do that. Oh boy. Get this thing turned up. Oh, that's not good. That's not good. Just start welding to the computer, right? Try not to touch it again. Alright. So see that purple and white wire? That's the one that you're after. And the yellow one right next to it is the neutral safety switch wire from the transmission. So you can hook, instead of the purple and white wire, if you wanted to bypass the safety stuff, you could hook right into this yellow wire instead. You could pull that, you could cut this off, hook into that, and the car will start. And that's how I was doing it at first, because I couldn't figure out what wire from where would make this car start. Okay, so that's the starter part of it. See if I can show you how I did it there. Alright, here's my factory purple wire, and since I cut it last year, I had to use another wire and extend it through the firewall to hook up to the purple and white. Now it all works with the key. We've got the starting and running part out of the way. I'll get into the accessories part of it. This orange wire, I left it in here to supply 12 volts to my OBD2 connector at all times. You want a good 12 volt source, or else your scan tool or EFI Live, HP Tuner stuff won't work very well. It'll give you problems. I've ran into that in the past. So the best thing to do is go straight from the battery to the connector, but this works pretty well too. So this orange wire straight from looks like it's A5, goes to the orange wire on your OBD2 connector. Okay, this is a spare one I had laying around. See the orange wire here? That's the one we're hooking into from C1A5. Alright. The fuel pump. C3F1 gray wire goes straight to the fuel pump. That is this wire on this red connector. Gray wire. I think it's the only gray wire on this connector, I'm pretty sure. Heavy gauge gray wire. And that goes directly to your fuel pump. That supplies the power to your fuel pump. You don't have to have another fuse, another relay, nothing in line. You can run that directly to the fuel pump. Now I have mine ran to another relay in the back that hooks directly to the battery. And I wanted to make sure that I had a good 12 volts to my fuel pump at all times. But you don't gotta have that. That's just, you know, that was just an extra thing that I did to make it run. I mean, that's the wire that runs directly to the back of a Silverado to supply power to the fuel pump. Works. So fuel pump wiring done. The tan and white wire is your oil pressure signal from C100. Okay, you see, let's see, tan and white. This thing will focus. This one here, that is for an aftermarket or, you know, a factory oil pressure gauge. So I didn't take it out. I left it in there so later on if I wanted to run an aftermarket one or try to even hook up the factory gauge, I would have something to wire to. And that wire is directly from the pressure sensor on the back of the engine. It's hard to see it, but right there it is. Boy, this thing don't focus. C100 white TACH signal. Once again, that is from this connector. It's just a white wire coming out of it. There's only one white wire in that mess. And I did the same thing. I ran it into this harness, but I just left it there. I didn't actually hook it up to anything. That's for if I want to do an aftermarket TACH later on. I have the wiring there. Now, according to the guy that runs the LT1 Swap website, on your TACH wiring, I guess some of these computers don't put out enough voltage on the TACH wire to actually run at like an autometer, tachometer, any aftermarket one. So I've not got into that mess yet. He says some of them do, some of them don't. So if you use it, you may get lucky. It may work. It works on my laptop. Like I run it through the OBD2 connector and it works. So I don't worry about it too much. I'm probably never going to run an aftermarket TACH in this car. The check engine light, dark brown and white. Now, through trial and error, I figured out that it supplies ground through this wire from the computer. So don't hook your check engine light up to your wire and then hook the other side of your wire up to a ground, because it won't work. I had a light here that I've put in the car, had it wired up correctly. The light wasn't working, but I put my voltometer on it, and the meter reads good, so apparently my light's not any good. But the wiring is in there, and that is, what did I say? Dark brown and white out of this connector. So here it is, you can kind of see it right here. That's the one you're looking for. And I ran that up through into the car, and then wherever you want to put the check engine light, I've got mine running right here. Obviously I need to find another light to hook into it. There again, my voltmeter works. So a good way to test it is just turn your key switch on. Your key switch on, your check engine light will come on. Then when you start the car, it should go out unless you got a problem, and then it stays on, obviously. So let's go on to the next thing. Okay, the purple white wire going to the torque converter clutch solenoid on your brake switch. This is an important one. The reason you would need this one is if you're running a 4L80E or or even a 4L60E, anything that uses a torque converter clutch, any of the overdrive transmissions. So what this does is, okay, you're driving down the road and the clutch is locked up. Well, you go to hit the brake, this unlocks the clutch, and then the car starts shifting down, and so it'd be like driving a manual car, not pressing your clutch pedal in. You come to a stop and the thing's going to die. So you've got to have this wiring if you're running an overdrive transmission. The purple wire I'm using is at the top of this connector, 1, 2, 3, 4 wires from the left. And the best way to go about making sure it's the right one is use a voltometer and just going pin to pin, and you should be able to figure it out. Let's see, this one would go to, I can't remember if it goes to the computer or if it goes straight to the transmission wiring. If it does, it's easy enough. You take the transmission connector, use an ohm meter across the two, and then you'll figure out which one's which. But anyways, it should be correct, and I've got that running through this harness into the car, and then alright, so here's the tricky part. Let's see. One of these wires, alright, there is a switch see this switch right here? Alright, now there's a purple wire coming out of it. There's a purple and a pink. You see that purple wire? That's the one you're shooting for. Now I just spliced into it. And from what my understanding, that supplies 12 volts. I think that's the one that actually powers the brake lights, but it'll also power the solenoid also. Or does it cut power off? I don't remember. Anyways, that's the wire you're shooting for. This wire runs out to C100, and that shuts off your torque converter clutch when you apply the brakes. Okay, you've got to have that. Unless you're running a Turbo 350 or a 400 or a Power Glide, and then it doesn't matter. You've made life easy on yourself. Just looked it up. That is supposed to be just a purple wire. I got most of this information from the LT1 Swap website. If you've not been on there, check it out because it's really good information. Not everything I was looking for was on there, like the starter wiring, the purple and white wire. but everything else is. So, alright, let's keep moving. Okay, the dark green OBD2 wire goes into the OBD2 connector pin 2 from C100. Okay, I had to cut my zip tie off to show you exactly which wire I'm talking about here, but the dark green wire that you're looking for will be this top left one in this connector. This connector is not really labeled. I'm sure it is labeled somewhere, but I'm not really seeing anything. There is another dark green wire in here. It is on the bottom side in the, see there? Just don't get the two mixed up. I don't know what the other one does. But this top left one is the one that works, and I just tested it with my laptop to make sure that I was telling you correctly. So, now that's done. That wires into the back of this OBD2 connector. Wherever you put it in the car, doesn't matter. The other two, let's see. A lot of these wires don't get used. Let's see, these two brown wires do not get used. And then the black ones, both of them are grounded. So just ground these to any piece of metal under the dash and you should be good to go. Orange is 12 volts at all times, not moving just the keys on, all the time. Dark green is the actual wire the information comes through, and the blacks are ground. Browns don't get used. I think that's for an earlier model deal, the brown ones. Not real for sure on that. So anyways, it's done. So now your car runs and probably moves if you've used a 3-speed older transmission. Okay, I have EFI Live hooked up to the car right now. It is showing 72 degrees in here. That's probably about right up there at the car. This map sensor deal, EFI Live is killing me. I can't get a straight answer out of anybody on it. This is a factory map sensor on it, and even with the with other map sensors, sometimes it'll do it, sometimes it won't. It'll read right sometimes, and other times it just doesn't. So, when you're in boost, it'll read some astronomical number that isn't even close to being right. All right, so we'll get to anti-theft. Let's see, EFI Live tuning tool. Now I've just got to find anti-theft. You want my honest opinion on EFI Live? I hate it. There's no good information on how to use EFI Live out there. I think HP tuners, everybody says it's way more user-friendly, and I'm wanting to lean that way, but I've already spent $800 on this, so got to use it right. Read calibration data from PCM. We'll come back to this in a moment. While that's going on, I'll show you, this is where the factory connector is for the cars, for these Grand Prix, G-body cars, I guess. I just unscrewed the factory one since it's useless now and put the aftermarket one in its place. Screws right in the exact same spot. It's perfect. Just to make sure I'm telling you right, just want to double check these brown wires. Yeah, not using them. Fuel pump kicks on. Flash retrieved successfully. Okay, now to return PSM to normal operation, turn the ignition to the off position, select OK, and wait for the countdown to complete. Key is off. Hit OK, wait for the countdown. Alright, now let me go on to another big rant on EFI Live, and maybe this may have to do with HP tuners also, but I have a severe problem with whenever you're trying to flash the thing and the fuel pump kicks on, it's like it shuts this part of it off, the laptop part of it. And so what I've had, and it'll brick a PCM, like make it useless. So what I've had to do is put in like an inline switch or a spade connector to unhook the fuel pump wiring while I'm flashing it, just to keep this from happening. You can fix the PCMs. You just have to do a hard reflash on them to get them to work. But I think it doesn't do it every time. But I don't know. It may be a problem on my part, but I've had to do it on several different vehicles, so I'm not sure what the problem is. So turn the key back on. Close this out. All right. We will go to I can zoom in on some of this. Let's go to system. I'm not sure where it's at. Theft, parameters, anti-theft. I've already turned it to none. Once you do that, you can save it, then go up here to program PCM with currently loaded calibration. You do that, it'll ask you some questions. Are you sure? It'll ask you twice. Do it, and anti-theft is gone. So I've already done it. That part's done. Save changes? No. I don't want to do anything. It's already good as it is. Alright, so trying to think if I'm missing anything. So with EFI Live, it cost me $125 to buy a VIN license to be able to turn the theft off on a computer. I think with HP tuners, I think it's $50. I'm not real sure. The guy that runs the LT1 swap website, he does it for I think $75. I think that includes the shipping back to you. So that's really the best deal if you're not willing to invest in the tuning software yourself. Which, if you're doing this for your first time, it may not be a wise idea to invest in tuning software just yet. It's a lot to take on. So, like, you know, that's up to you. You can wire electric fans in. However, to do that, if you're going to tear into it that far, you might as well make a standalone harness at that point. You're already moving wires around. So, with that being said, I bought a standalone electric fan setup from Painless. I don't remember the part number offhand. The next video, I'll probably make that the next video. And then I'll do a transmission wiring video. The transmission wiring, there's not much there. It's just a little bit of time consuming nonsense. So Gosh, if there's anything I'm forgetting, somebody mail me a hate letter or something. That's the simplest way I can tell you to wire this thing up. All my wiring is ran through the firewall. I drilled a hole, put a grommet in it. Somebody asked me if I knew what all the wiring was coming out of this connector from the factory firewall connector. Well, you've got two wires that come out for the power going to the fuse block, so you've got to have those and just hook them up here. And the big purple wire, if you haven't cut it off already, go ahead and use it. Go into your starter. Other than that, I think the rest of it may go to gauges. I'm not sure. If you can figure out what wire goes where, shoot, let me know. Or make a video, something. The rest of them, I cut them all off. I cut off every wire. Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, this thing starts and runs. Once I have the transmission wired up, which isn't too far off, I can be driving it. But I'm waiting on, I'm looking into a transmission cooler at the moment. And once I get the transmission cooler on, get my fans wired up, put some water in the radiator, I'll be able to drive it. I will once again put a document at the end of this video. Here's something I guess I'll tell you. Throttle cable. This throttle cable is actually from a 99 Camaro Z28 without traction control. It hooks right up to the gas pedal on these cars. Here's the other side of it. And it's kind of long, but it's... Why does it feel so short now? I need to pull it back here a little bit. Okay. And then you may have to trim part of this to fit in that hole. I think I got to cut mine yet. I haven't done it on this one. This bracket, actually I'll rob it off the old one, old engine. But yeah, you trim this up a little bit, cut this hole a little bit bigger, and it plugs right in, then it hooks right up to your throttle body, and it's good. Also, don't try to start this thing without the mass airflow sensor being hooked up, because you got to have it. I do not have this thing tuned for speed density. I have basically a factory Silverado tune in this car because I want to experiment with EFI Live a little bit before I do a speed density tune. And EFI Live has like a self-tuning deal on here. I've never used it. The people that do use it say it's great, but I've not really had a vehicle to test it out on until now. This is the first time I haven't directly put turbos on something, so this goes back here like so. These little tabs here stick out and it hooks up there, and then electrical center. So I guess I'll tell you, there's a couple of relays and some wiring down here. That's for the headlights. It's got some aftermarket headlights in this thing. They're kind of goofy, so I had to wire relays into them. There you can see the way it's hooked up. The computer I just kind of threw in here for now, and you see me spark it off of the positive post there. So it's still working though. Let's see. Don't really have anything else for you other than I need to still get a check engine light that works, that's wired up. See, it's in park. Ooh, that starter. Yeah, runs good. So, like I said, if you got any questions, let me know. I'll do my best to help you out. It's hard to explain on the internet. and it's hard to explain without somebody just standing here next to you and you're showing them what's what. But this is a pretty good list to go by, and I hope it helps you. So, all right, good luck.